So today, what we're going to be talking about is curiosity and conversation. And this leads us into the MECOP weekend, where on Friday we have an event with our speaker, Larissa, and going to be talking about things related to curiosity and conversation and community change, and the same thing on Saturday. So, and I'll try to speak up because I know Dory says I'm soft voice sometimes. So we're going to look at a video today, and I want to set the background for it. It's a video that was part of a KUOW curiosity group that started, some of this started before the pandemic, but it really was taking place during the pandemic, and they had what they called a curiosity club. And so what they wanted to do was bring together 10 people with different kinds of backgrounds and, you know, beliefs and everything, and have a virtual dinner party and give them the opportunity to discuss different topics. So we'll watch a very short video on that, about 5 minutes. I'm going to set up the video though, because they talk about 3 different topics. And I was going to play you a brief video before that, but I can just describe it. One of the things that kind of took off during the pandemic, when people wanted to be able to see other people, and they were mostly homebound, is folks that were able to got out and roller skated. And so they went to like different places, but one of the areas in Seattle was Judkins Park, and which is a big community place because it's actually the place where a lot of the marches often start. Like the Women's March started there, you know, and then one off from there. But they would get together and they could be outside and then have conversation with people. And then out of that, people made new friends and they created community during that time. So at the beginning of this video, they're talking a little bit about the group that was doing the roller skating at Judkins Park. Then they go on to talk about a topic that was related to someone during the Me Too movement, a man who was actively advocating to support women during the Me Too movement. I'm going to tell you, we're not going to play that video because they've actually taken it off of the KUOW website and the story. So it just says at the bottom of the website, the story is under investigation, and that's all it is. So I'll just leave that there. Which the actual background behind it isn't what's important. It was the idea that it sparked conversation. And then the third part, they have some conversation around the election. They seem to mention Trump many times. So if there are people that have different political beliefs one way or the other, I'll just set you up to know that there's just discussion in there, and some of it you might agree with or not agree with. So anyway, but the idea of this video and what they went into this whole virtual dinner party was to think about, you know, what sparks curiosity and how do we have conversations with people that we may not have the same viewpoints, we may not even know anything about. And now we're going to get together and meet new people. And how do we start to have that conversation with other people? So what I would say is, while you're watching this, think about what makes you curious. You know, what sparks your curiosity? The idea of curiosity is it's a desire for learning. And I think personally, one of my experiences, if I don't have enough curiosity and enough learning in my life, it's almost like I just crawl under a rock. It's just this like part of my whole being. But then sometimes if there's too much of that curiosity and too many different kinds of ideas and things swirling around, it's almost the opposite. And I think about it like, I always like to think about it like I've got a rubber band here. And if you don't have any curiosity at all, there's nothing going on. You know, it's just like more being stagnant. If there's too much, it's going to snap. So there's this right amount of kind of learning and changing that we can be part of. Go ahead.
And Nancy, before we begin this, a big thing that I want to understand is the difference between curiosity and being nosy. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so hold that thought. That is a great question. Yeah, let's watch the video and then let's have that conversation, because that's a little bit similar to something Dory brought up last week about asking good questions. And when are the questions,
Too much.
you know, I think she has someone in her life that has given her feedback that sometimes the questions might be too much.
Yeah, there's someone in our life too that I mean, I'm really careful about that. Am I being nosy or am I being curious?
We'll hold that, because I think that's a really good point for discussion. Let's watch the video and then let's come back to
Thank
that.
Nosy, that's where we get along with each other.
Isn't nosy a form of compassion?
I'm sorry, what you.
Isn't nosy a form of compassion?
It could be.
It's not.
I'm not surprised that I shocked somebody tonight.
So, hold on, because I'm gonna share it.
Here. You might want to share first and then,
Oh, yeah.
then make it bigger.
Dory, I'm so glad you're here. Because
I was so glad you were here last week.
screen.
And then do share sound and optimize video. Do you see those?
Oh, yeah. Oh, do I have to do that?
You don't have to, but it's good. Click and then go.
Okay, and so now I go share and then I'll go to that.
Yeah, share.
Yeah, okay. This.
It's kind of my thing. I'm not surprised that I shocked somebody tonight. It's kind of my thing.
I want to know more. I have follow-ups.
Does everyone have their cocktail with them? We're gonna find out what happens when people stop being polite and start getting curious. So, welcome. In times of civil unrest, political upheaval, and a pandemic, how are you thinking about stories like our roller skating story?
There was just this like silliness and kind of unbridled joy.
Apparently, you can make anything look super fly if you really believe in yourself.
The story and the folks involved in the story reminded me that joy is a verb. It's not something that we have, but it's something that we do.
Especially in COVID, like longing for this connection to people in general, but like particularly to Black joy.
I'm going to reference a Crosscut article where they basically say like Black joy is sacred because it's earned. There's suffering behind, you know, being Black in America, and so what joy is it's a place of resistance. To have a space that's your own, that isn't, you know, the systems, and it isn't like some powerful being over, you know, seeing you.
I was wondering if anyone else would like to chime in on that idea of joy as resistance.
I definitely agree with that and I find pride in that. But then on the other hand, I've started to feel a little aggravated by the framing of Black joy always in relationship to an oppressor. Sometimes it's nice that Black joy is just Black joy and it's not a reaction to something else.
I'm reclaiming my joy in that I bought a pair of roller skates. I ain't unpacked them yet, but I'm gonna get out there, even in the rain.
So we got an email from a woman who said, why would you publish this story? You're taking up space when the space should be reserved for survivors. Our thinking was that by sharing this voice, that we can sort of share the burden of how some people are reckoning with the Me Too movement and how some people are trying to be better without putting all of that responsibility on survivors to tell the story.
Maybe I just have a really low expectations for men, but I found it pretty surprising and, you know, pretty evolved that he would, you know, go to the lengths that he did to try to improve himself.
Okay, are they truly doing this, or is this for public consumption?
What he shared is someone who showed that they were committed to trying to improve themselves.
You talked about being Latino. I know what machismo is. It's a thing.
I do think that race and ethnicity matters, and not being able to find mental health counselors who look like you, who've been through experiences like you, grappling with like what's consent and what have I been taught about, like you need to try again, you need to try again, you need to try again.
I was raised by people who were born in a pre-modern world. My mother just repeated all this misogynist crap all my life, and just got to be really burdensome.
This piece just screamed how detrimental the patriarchy is.
You think you know your neighbors, and then to feel so out of touch, I guess. I have no insight into why would they support Trump.
I have a good friend who is Vietnamese and owns a store in the International District. Doesn't like walking to her car. She feels unsafe. It wouldn't surprise me if there were some people in that community who said, what's going on around me, I really don't like. And I want to make a statement about that.
If the key is gaining the minority vote, you need to really start to understand the differences.
Liberals sometimes think they know more than your own experience, seeing cultures and ethnic groups as monolithic.
Those who might come from families that had to flee communist countries don't want anything to do with socialism. And when it's just like Asians, Hispanics, and that's it, I view it as liberal racism. Cubans have been Republican since the 60s.
I actually feel at a place that I do need to open myself up more, and I have to like have more of those conversations with now people that I love, and you know, those that I don't as well. So yeah.
Yes, be friends with Trump voters. How are you going to change hearts and minds if you don't befriend them?
I think that it's exhausting trying to make sense out of crazy.
Our lives are legitimately at risk.
It's really interesting to get together with a group of people who have a variety of viewpoints and hear the perception that the other side is progressive and winning, when the other side thinks the same thing about the other side.
We're all in this country together, bottom line. So the better that we can make it together, that's what I'm going for. I see your faces.
Is the Curiosity Club still going? I don't think so. I think this might have been one of the last. I searched for that. I tried to look and see if they were still doing it. But maybe we have to think about starting our own Curiosity Club. Oh, good. Okay. So maybe first question, just observations. I know that video, when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh, it's like it's all coming at me.
Yeah.
And then I had to really go back and look at those three distinct stories and think about them, because the idea was, you know, that's the conversation starter. And then they're taking snippets of everybody's viewpoints, talking about those three different topics. But in general, the idea of it was you have a group of people getting together and they seem to be sharing fairly openly in that setting of not knowing each other about their views about things. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is she started out with stop being polite and let's start being curious. And so that made me think maybe that's a Seattle thing where we think that we have to not be polite to be curious. Maybe it is okay. And that leads into your question, Sharon.
Yeah.
Like when is being curious being nosy?
I
But
would
then,
say it's in the mind of the listener, that the same questions you ask of one person, they would jump into and welcome as a good conversation, but other people don't like it.
mhm.
And you don't know that till you ask the question the first time, or maybe the second, because they might not tell you the first time. Go on.
Yeah, what do other people think about that? Let's go with
start
that for a minute.
nosiness. What do you think?
Well, I think I would like to err on the side of not being nosy, so my tendency is to back off on questions. And just to give you an example, our grandson lives with us.
Mhm.
And you know, when he comes in, I would love to hear about his day and everything that's going on, but I don't want to be nosy.
Mhm.
So of course, I always ask him, how was your day? Or tell me about it. But, you know, I want more than that, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Another example of that is, I think Sharon has, and I do too, an interest in people's country of origin if their appearance would say they're from another country.
Mhm.
But like we saw in a video a while back, some people could take offense to that
Yeah,
and say, well, I'm American, I'm from here, I was born in Brooklyn.
yeah,
I want to know well what your ancestors were, just because it makes it kind of an interesting cultural discussion potentially,
Mhm.
but not everybody sees it that way.
so is some of it possibly how we frame those questions? So like this is a really good question, Jack, because I was having this conversation with someone this week. And I said, one of the things I often do, instead of saying, where are you from, to anybody, I'll start by just saying, oh, which part of the United States did you grow up in? And that takes out anything of assuming anything about someone. And then usually people will openly share either where they grew up, either in the United States or somewhere else, and not feel like I was asking a question related to their ethnicity.
And the way I handle that is.
So I don't know if that works, but so far I haven't had anybody give me the stink eye too much from
The
that.
way I handle that is listen to see if they have an accent. Because if they don't have an accent, it's an inappropriate question. If they speak with an American accent. But it means that they were brought up in America, even if they were born somewhere else. And if I hear an accent, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I often, this is usually with taxi drivers or Uber drivers, at some point just ask them, how long have you been in Seattle or something like that, and then show curiosity about their country of origin. But some people don't like it, don't want to talk about it, I
Yeah.
suppose. But I have found that a lot of people do,
Yeah.
if they actually are an immigrant. But I would not to judge them by what they look like, but what you hear in the way of an accent or not. I don't know, that's just me.
That's a good
Mhm.
point.
That would get over Larissa's problem, because I would look at her and listen to her voice and would not ask where she was from. Yeah.
So this question, what's your country of origin, which I always thought was appropriate, is not really particularly appropriate.
Well, I will do it if I hear an accent.
Okay.
And if you hear an accent, then often the person did grow up in that other country.
Right.
And sometimes
Mhm.
people like to talk about it, but maybe I do, I've listened to these things telling you shouldn't do it, and maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But I often get a good reaction, so
Yeah.
if they have an accent, if they don't have an accent, don't ask.
Don't ask.
Go ahead, Paula.
I think too, part of it is being able to learn how to build connections and relationships with one another. So learning how to ask questions and adjusting that if we learn some better, different way to ask our questions. But also having the confidence to say, that's not an appropriate question if someone asks you something. Or being able to say, I'm not really in a place to answer that right now.
Yeah.
I think it kind of works on both sides. And that's something I loved about the video was folks who jumped in and said, I don't think that's right. Or, is this really because they're trying to make themselves better or they're trying to make themselves look better? I think was sort of the heart of that. We have to get over our politeness and get over curiosity. We have to be okay to disagree or to correct one another sometimes. I know that happens to me often. I went to the doctor this week and the lady was really strange. I couldn't figure out what was going on until she finally was like, and I'm supposed to ask this for everybody, I guess. Is there any chance you're pregnant? But she was so afraid to just ask me how I identify, to know if she should be asking that question. That it would have saved all of us a lot of discomfort, and I could have just told her at the beginning, or, you know, even if it was, no, that's not a question you need to ask me kind of thing. It's so interesting how we're so hesitant to hurt anyone's feelings, that either we don't ask a question that could lead to a good conversation, or we don't correct people when they ask us a question that's not appropriate or that's just uncomfortable.
Well, I thought in the video where that was good was the one woman brought up that she really didn't like the way that the other individual had framed Black joy as always in struggle. And I thought the way she did it was both kind, but also direct. And I appreciated that. I liked the way that went because you could tell the other person was listening. They showed her face when she was saying that. But then to sit and not say something, then it kind of takes away from what they were trying to achieve. So it was nice that she said something like, speak up, ask a question, and then I guess beg forgiveness.
Last night we had our, well, what's normally a holiday party, but they had it last night for our neighborhood. And so you're meeting some people that you've known forever, and then some people you've never met before. And so you kind of have to, again, pick the right first question. Usually where we live, it's, do you live on the upper loop or lower loop? and then, but you know, I just got into, do you have kids, dogs, or horses? I usually have one of those. And it, you know, because you don't want to offend someone also by assuming they would or wouldn't have kids, or, you know, or, and then the, you know, the follow-up questions again are also the important ones. Well, you know, like this one neighbor, I was surprised. I asked, I know her, she lives across the street, but I don't talk to her a lot. And so I asked her how her son was doing. He was just gonna turn 18. Well, she went on for a long time about how he was doing and not doing, and you know, and stuff. So it just was the right. She was, but she asked, you know, she could have cut it right off too. She could have just said, oh, he's fine, you know, and then that would have ended that conversation. And the nosiness would have been to probe again when someone has said, oh, he's fine. Well, what does fine mean?
But does he have a job yet?
I know.
So maybe that's a really good point there to Sharon's question is, when does it become nosy? And if the person, like Kelly had said, is giving you the signal, maybe that question wasn't the appropriate question, or ask a different one, and then you continue to probe, then maybe that's nosy. Whereas the first question, it seems like we should get a question as a little grace in there.
I had an interesting experience recently. I was together with two of my very closest friends, and one of them said something about how upset she is about the extremes of the woke movement. And I detected that she had different views on this than I did. But I asked her to just explain it because I just didn't understand. And she did. She stood up and she was very very vocal about it, but at the same time, and I just listened to her and didn't argue back on anything. And then later she followed up with an email and said, well, maybe I should explain it a little bit more. Like she was a little nervous that since I hadn't said anything, maybe I had taken offense, or she didn't know what I thought, because I really didn't say. I just kept asking questions.
How did you ask the first question? Because that would be really.
Well, she somehow brought it up, and I just said, I'm curious about, I don't know what I said. It would be great to have a little tape recording, but she was hesitant to do it, but she did. And then later when she followed up, I by email, I also answered her and I said, I'm really glad that you talked to us about that. And I don't know much about it. Actually, I haven't been paying much attention. It sounds like it's a lot on the university campuses, and I haven't really been paying attention. And I don't know of examples of this, so maybe you could point out examples when you hear it and let me know more about it. Then, but I think I handled it well, but you could ask her.
I think that's a good point. It's can you be comfortable in a conversation with someone with whom you disagree? Can that, I mean, rather than try to turn it off or rather to try to swing them to your side, can you just somehow have a conversation on both sides? And it sounds like you were.
Well, it wasn't on both sides, it was actually more me listening and being curious, and I didn't respond to her. I just accept to ask more questions. And that's probably why she was a little nervous afterwards, because she couldn't tell what I was thinking, because I was curious, because actually I don't have any other friends that have talked to me that way, and I wanted to know. She said, I think the extremes on the left are just as bad as the extremes on the right. And I said, well, tell me about it. What do you hear? What are some examples of this? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I handled it well, but
Yeah.
I was curious. I was genuinely curious because I haven't heard people give that point of view. I wanted to know.
I was thinking with Jack's question too, that I have a friend at work and I know we have different beliefs on pretty much everything. But we're able to talk about religion and church, and he's very involved in his church. And I'm always just curious. So how are you doing this in your church and everything? And you know, sometimes his beliefs cross over into things I'm like, not going there. But if I can bring it back to what sometimes what the similarities are, then we keep that point of connection. So, you know, like we go too far off on one conversation, I'll say, but God loves everybody, right? Isn't that something that your church believes? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's the way they believe. I said, good. Okay, we agree on that. Let's go on to the next topic.
And I think too, I think this comes from like couples counseling maybe, but using I language. So I'm not making assumptions about you or even the experiences that you've had. But I'll say, oh, that's interesting that you see this thing over here, because you know, immigration and you live in Texas is really different than immigration and you live in Seattle, or you know, those kinds of things, and being able to explain your experience without projecting it onto someone else. And allowing them to share some of the things they see from their experience too, I think really helps, so that it's not like, well, everyone thinks this thing, I can't believe you think this other thing. We're kind of inviting folks to hear it just as what I experience in my life. You can't really deny what I experienced in my life, hopefully. But also then that invites them to share things from their experience. And again, maybe we can find some more commonalities in the process, like you're talking about, Nancy.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if sometimes if we let judgment become our first thinking and feeling emotion, instead of curiosity, if that in all of these different conversations where people have disparate views, if that's what shuts it down, because once we have judgment about someone and we hear a view that they have, and then we pile on a lot of our own thinking about what that person might be like or might think about other things, instead of that idea that everybody's talking about, where we just ask some questions. How did you come to believe that? You know, tell me more, like Dory was saying. What's your experience with that? So at least we can understand. Because I think if we don't have even an opportunity to hear someone else's voice, how can we understand them as a person?
That's one of the things David Brooks says in his book is to a question, how did you come to believe that? Not why do you believe that, but just, and then it invites a story.
Yeah.
Oh, when I was 10, whatever, or when I went to college, I found it, or whatever. And then you get a sense of where they're coming from. Like you said, if you're from Texas, you see immigration in a very different way. Well, when I was growing up in El Paso, whatever. And then you can understand a little bit why they would have a different view than you do.
Yeah. So what do all of you do to spark your curiosity, to encourage your curiosity? So if you think about curiosity as that desire for learning and for knowing more about things, what are things that you do? You know, the kind of the psychological research is people are curious because it's something that benefits themselves. You know, they go after learning something new because of could be a desire to want to develop a new skill or understand something better, or in a relationship, you're curious because you want to just continue to have the relationship grow and flourish. But I know personally, there's times where I just kind of, lose my oomph for wanting to be curious about something. I'm either too tired, too much information. And then, there's things that you can do to just kind of allow yourself to get back in that space where you're curious again. Any thoughts?
Come to things like this where you talk about different.
Yeah, that's one of them.
Your next advertisement for coming days.
And reading.
Mhm.
That's why, I'm in a couple book clubs, and some people will not read the book because they don't think that's gonna be interesting, or it doesn't. But I say that's the exact reason to read that book that somebody else thought was interesting and had some value. Because I wouldn't read it every day, it's to read something I wouldn't pick up on my own, and so it's, being curious about something else.
Or even in a book club, if you didn't like the book and somebody else did, listen to why they liked it, and it might improve your understanding of it and improve your appreciation, even if you still would recommend it to a friend.
They talk about how just going for a walk, actually, either by yourself or with someone, is a really great opportunity to spark your curiosity, because you get outside, you get a little bit out of your head. You have the physical movement, and I think probably the conversation with like young people, I probably learned more driving the soccer carpool when Joey was younger, because you're in the car and I'm just listening. Occasionally I'd throw in a question and then they would talk for another 15-20 minutes, and it's like you're not even in the car. When there's a group of kids, for some reason, when they're going to a sports event or something, they assume the car just drives itself. The mom isn't sitting there kind of listening into everything.
And very curious about what.
And very curious, like you are, because you want to know, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts, what you do? Mary, how are you this morning?
Quiet.
What you say?
I'm interested. When you first mentioned the curiosity, I was thinking not just of relationships, but about knowledge. I love to learn new things. And so PBS is my love whenever they have something that they haven't repeated 4 times. But I also like the word, I'm interested, not curious. Because curious is almost about self instead of about the other. So I sometimes say, well, I'm interested to know, not curious, but I'm interested. And I'm more comfortable saying that, and I would be more comfortable hearing that. Those are my thoughts.
To use that, Mary, kind of as a conversation starter. Oh, I'm curious about that.
Yeah,
Could
I'm
you be
interested in that.
Oh, I'm interested in that.
Yeah. In other words, I'm listening. Yeah, and yes, I would like to know, but curious can feel like somebody's pushing at you, pointing at you, and it's not. It's next to nosy. But yeah,
I like that. I'm interested in.
Yeah, I'm interested, because I am. But and that's as we were talking about last time, has to do not only with what we say, but how we say it and where we are, and how we look at people, and how we're standing or sitting. And you can say you're interested and then not even look at them. So there, curiosity is. I was interested to learn what you meant by curiosity. That's it. I'm done.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
I've had a cold all week, and talking isn't lots of fun.
Okay. Well, I hope you feel better.
I do. I'm much better. Yeah, don't talk to me last Monday, but now it's okay.
Okay, good. So what are ways that all of you approach conversations to be interested in someone's viewpoints when you have a good sense that it's different than your own?
I personally have to check in with myself and make sure I have the energy and capacity to do this faithfully.
That's a
Because
really
there
good point.
are times when I'm not gonna be a kind conversation partner with someone that I
Yeah.
disagree with, or even what the topic is, that we might disagree on. And I think that helps me to check in, to make sure that I'm not being nosy or I'm not being argumentative and
Yeah.
really genuinely seeking understanding with this person. So that's an important first step for me.
So kind of checking your energy level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you up for the?
At book club, we had read a book about the depression. And so somehow it got on the twist of, well, a lot of these people in this book, it was about this man that offered money to someone if they wrote him a letter. And not, he was anonymous, he put a fake name, and he'd give them $10 for Christmas, and which was a lot of money during the Depression. And so his grandson gets these letters years later and follows up because he's curious about what happened to all these families that, got this money. But anyway, so this woman said that, and they wouldn't take, all these families would be starving to death and wouldn't take charity. And so this woman at the book club, she said, well, unlike today, when they're just want to take charity and they don't want to work and they don't want to blah, 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 blah. And I could see where it was going. And I knew I couldn't engage. Luckily, there was someone else that tried to engage a little bit. Well, why do you think this? Well, because her dad was dirt poor and made it. Her white dad in Idaho was dirt poor and made it. And, and so the other person said, well, don't you think there's circumstances where that's not possible, you're sin, because she volunteers at ICS too. And so she was trying to give some examples, but I knew that it was just going to go because she was convinced that anybody can get a job, anybody can survive. You just have to work hard enough and long enough. And and so anyway, so I had to be quiet because I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to ask the right questions.
Well, go ahead, Dory.
So it depends on how much time you have.
Yeah.
I spent some time recently with another friend that I know has a very different view about China than I do. And I said, I'm curious to know more. Well, I don't know what if I said the word curious or not, now come to think of it, but I'd like to know more about, because you changed your view on China, what caused you to change it? And we were in a taxi on the way to an airport and about to arrive.
Yeah.
Well, that was the wrong time to ask. And looking back at it, like at the beginning of the ride, maybe it was a 40-minute ride, maybe at the beginning, or maybe it was just in a taxi is not the right place to bring it up. And I don't know if I should bring it up again or not, because she's been very reluctant to talk to me about it because she wants to preserve our friendship.
Yeah. That's interesting to think about because in both situations, like Chris, your situation, because it was more public, because you're in a group of people, maybe sometimes it's harder to have that discussion with someone. If you were with them one-on-one and it was more private, maybe you could ask them and it wouldn't be something where they would have to defend their opinion versus, you have to say something to make sure people understand you don't agree with her, right? I mean, that's the hard part. Do you want to bring it up with her, Dory?
I would like to know, but I don't know how. I feel it's scary, especially if it's a really good friend.
Yeah.
And she's been avoiding it because she wants to preserve our friendship. So maybe she's right. I don't know.
Yeah.
She's not curious about my point of view. She thinks she already knows.
Yeah.
Then is there something to be gained then?
I don't know.
Nancy?
Well, I've decided not to.
Yeah,
Mary?
go ahead, Mary.
I was going to say, ask yourself, why do you want to know? what is your interest? What is it to know them better? Or, there's sometimes the what's our motivation to do this anyway? It's human beings are interested in each other, but they're also mostly interested in themselves. And so people don't always believe that you're interested. They sometimes think you're just pushing or being nosy or something. It's hard. I find it hard to convey sometimes that I'm actually just interested to know. And I have no other goal than understanding them better or knowing them better.
Or they may think that you're trying to start an argument in a way. You're trying to convince them not to think that way.
Yeah.
And that the opening is, can you tell me what wrong beliefs you have so I can correct them? That may be the way they hear it.
Yeah.
Well, and if they are people around mostly that kind of person, but they're having to defend themselves, that it's hard to get those folks to open up. At the same time, I ask myself, why do I want to know? What is my goal in knowing? Is it so I will judge? So I will actually know them better, understand them? Why am I asking?
Those are tough questions. I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that. That's great.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about the person I talked about earlier, where we're able to talk about, religion and our religious beliefs. There's certain political things that we don't talk about. I would probably feel very comfortable talking with them about a different kind of opinion about something, whether it was like immigration or something like that. I wouldn't feel comfortable talking with the person about their choices for candidates. And I think part of that is because I'm just not sure there would be, I want to maintain the relationship. And I don't think there would be anything in that conversation that would shed some different light, where maybe the topics about, what you believe about certain things would be good conversation. So it's a hard one,
Yeah, sometimes it's better not to be curious or not to ask the question.
Yeah, some people they fear anybody getting to know them very well, or know why they're thinking, or having to put it into words, and they may never have done that themselves. Why they are, what they think, or where they learned it, or why they are thinking a certain way. How did I get that? Oh, I see. I've got that. Where did I get that? I've got that. My hand is. I have to move my cursor so it doesn't appear on the screen. I think of my family. Love my people more than you know. But there are things we simply cannot talk about. And there isn't, because there isn't a learned ability to just say what I think and not feel threatened. And that they're going to have to defend themselves, or that they are that they're assuming I don't agree, and therefore they're going to have to be, there's going to have to be a push and shove in it somehow. So there are times when we're very close, as long as we don't talk about some things. And that's a hard way to have a family, but it is how we are. And if I were to say I'm curious, I don't think they believe me.
Yeah.
Because they know I don't agree with them.
I think this is a good lead-in, though, Mary, for the Meekoff lectures and for the event next Friday and Saturday, because part of what we can listen for and be curious about it and ask lots of questions. So when Larissa's here is, in those times of kind of crucial conversations, that would create change in our community, when do we need to push through some of the things that we've just talked about, some of the things that are difficult, being respectful of other people, but to bring those kinds of conversations out so that we can actually maybe do something different together.
Mhm.
So any kind of parting words, final thoughts for today?
I guess the only thing I'd like to discuss for a minute is how much is age related to this topic? Do you think that people that are our age find it more difficult or to ask the right questions and use the right words?
I mean, personally, I would say you and Jack are two of the most curious people I know. And I've always appreciated sharing with you. You ask, like when we've been somewhere, you say, oh, may I ask this? I'd like to know a little bit more about this.
Yeah.
And I always appreciate that because it's a way to learn more, but also allow the person to have their say if they're willing to share that. To me, that's not nosy at all. That's really very thoughtful.
That's positive feel to it, I think, rather than like you're poised to be judgmental of what they might say.
Yeah.
Instead of, I'm just interested in knowing more about that.
But I don't think it's an age thing at all, being able to ask the right questions. I think, like David Brooks said last weekend, it probably all of us think we can do certain things and we can all be better at it. Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming today, and see everybody in church.
Is the NECOG lecture person gonna do the ACE class next time?
There isn't going to be an ACE class next week. And then we'll do the, because we'll have the gathering on Friday afternoon at 3. There's a gathering at the church. Please sign up if you haven't done so already. And then there's the lecture that starts at 10 and the lunch at 11:30. And then Larissa will do the sermon on Sunday.
Okay, but not an ACE hour.
Yeah.
Not an ACE hour.
Not an ACE class next week. Yeah.
Is there a lunch, did you say on Saturday or Sunday?
Yes, on Saturday.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing after worship on Sunday.
Coffee hour. I don't think there's anything beyond coffee hour.
No events. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so please, everybody sign up and bring your curiosity with you, or your interest level. I like that, Mary.